Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Kenny Conversation, brought to you by JEGS, the leader in high-performance aftermarket car parts. Remember to go to jegs.com for everything you need, and they are making the biggest deal out of. They have Jeep parts, they have truck parts. I know. Herman, where are you at? This is a way different look. My dear friend, Chris Blair, and Chris, you know, and everybody knows that the biggest racing week in St. Louis is June 2nd. That is a Sunday, but it's a NASCAR weekend. So we thought, come see the promoter. The promoter, Chris Blair. Chris, thank you for having me here.
Well, we kicked around the idea of us going to a bar like we usually do when we meet, but I thought after probably about 2 or 3, we'd be all out of control, and I'd probably be out of a job after this thing aired. So
You're the boss.
We're playing it safe. We're just keep it here early in the morning on Tuesday just to be safe.
That you said something that made me think. Cale Yarborough once taught me there's always somebody bigger than you.
Yeah.
So here at Worldwide Technology Raceway, I'm thinking the owner, Curtis Francois, he's the only one. Is that who you answer to?
That's who I answer to. I answer to Curtis, and very fortunate that I've got a boss who's in the room next door. So if I need to hear a no, I walk next door, I get a no or I get a yes. But we get to have some great conversations. So we work together daily. We're always working together. And I think Curtis is one of the very first Kenny conversations that you had. So it's
He really is.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what kind of guy he is. Just so you know, when people come in here next week, and you'll see all the weeds have been mowed and everything's looking good around here. Out here this past Saturday, I'm out driving around checking on things, and I see a skid steer with a brush hog attachment on the front of it going back and forth. And I drive over, and it's Curtis. He was out here chopping down the weeds. That kind of attention to detail you don't see anywhere else. So he's hands-on, and you don't see a lot of that these days.
And I find, and I'm sure you all find, that those Bobcats or anything like that, if anybody has one, they're very therapeutic. You know, I remember back in the Dale Earnhardt senior days, where's Earnhardt? Oh, he's out on his farm. What's he doing? He's knocking down trees. And by the way, coming in to the racetrack, they had a Bobcat. They had it brushed. They're manicuring. Everything looks really good around here.
Yeah, Department of Transportation's out there getting everything all cleaned up for us.
Yeah,
So it's looking
getting it
good.
ready for you all. Going to be easy in, great access. Let's go to you for a little bit. One of the reasons that I wanted to have a conversation with you is I find you very unique. You know, there's promoters that, you know, they're in NASCAR and that's where they've come. And they came up the ladder. But when I studied you, and I've told you this for the last 5 years, I'm like, my gosh, you're at a dirt track. You're at an asphalt track. So you came out of Kentucky as a dirt racer. Tell me about the early start of your career, because everybody's like, how do I get to be a promoter? So Kentucky and dirt racing.
It started out, I realized early on I was never going to get to race because my old man would have killed me had I tried to buy a race car. And so I started helping out with my neighbor, Barney Back. I was helping him out with his race car, and I soon found out I wasn't much of a mechanic. So I lettered his car, would do all kinds of things, and eventually opportunity came along with my local newspaper, the Mountain Eagle. They wanted to cover the races because that was one of the main things they requested. I found out I'd get $10 a story and I could get into the races for free. And for me, that was like the greatest thing ever. And so that was when I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school, started doing that. And, you know, opportunities just started presenting themselves. And the local track, the opportunity came along to do some promotion. And as I did more riding, other opportunities started to go. So I just hopped on for the ride to see where it would end up. Had no idea that we'd be where we are now.
You know, people will say to me all the time, how the hell do you get to where you got to? And I'm like, my God, it was a journey. And when I look at everything you've been through, I think of turning points. It's like it was this moment that got me here, and then it was still kind of rough. But when I look at your story, the great Dick Berggren, Dick is from the Northeast. He made himself famous by being on Fox. You know, he had the gentleman's cap, and but he's a Northeasterner, and now he runs the museum up there with everything in the Northeast. But I guess you did some writing for him that kind of Is that what got your foot in the door?
That really got my foot in the door more than anything else. And it all happened because David Alio, who was a photographer that he was traveling the country doing probably 200 races a year. He came to Mountain Motor Speedway in Isom, Kentucky one night when I was up there announcing, and I was telling him about some of the riding that I was doing. And he was doing all this work for Stock Car Magazine. Every time you would open up Stock Car Magazine, you'd see David Alio's pictures in there. And David came to me, he said, listen, he said, there's an opportunity for a story. He said, I think you'd be good for. He said, because it's a technical story. And he said, it's about a driver that you know and you followed from the beginning, and that it's a driver that trusts you, and that's Scott Bloomquist.
Wow.
And so I've been following Scott since he moved back to Kingsport back in 1985. So I go to Scott and I said, listen, Dick Berggren's wanting to do this story about you for Stock Car Magazine, and David Alio is going to shoot the pictures. And I said, are you good with me writing it? And I said, you're going to have to let me see everything behind the scenes. We're going to have to really work together on this story. And he says, yeah, let's do it. He said, I trust you. Let's do this. And so I'd load up, and I probably lost money on the story when I was said and done because I drove down to Scott's shop 2 or 3 times to sit down with him. We go over every little detail, and we work together on this piece. And, the very first time I ever submit anything to Dick Berggren, it ends up on the cover of I think it was the August 1991 issue of Stock Car Racing Magazine. And it was funny. I go to back to college that year to take a journalism class, and the professor said, hey, can you bring in samples of what you've done with other places? Well, I bring in a magazine that's been on a newsstand. So that helped me with my classes. But, what that did, though, is everybody then, if I gave them a phone call, whether it was Freddie Smith or Bob Pierce or any of these guys.
These are big names.
They were big names, and they recognized that you were the guy who wrote that Scott Bloomquist story. Yeah. And that helped. And then later on, as I was doing some more work for Dick, there was one year right after I got out of college, he was wanting to do a Mopar issue. Mm-hmm. And I just hopped in my car that summer and started going places. I went and talked to Bob Keselowski. He was racing up at Kilcare Speedway, did a story about his car.
Brad's dad. Brad Keselowski's dad.
Yeah, Brad wasn't even old enough to get in the pit area at the time. But, talked to Bob, got a great story on him. Neon Dion Deason, who had a Mopar running dirt late models, got him in that same issue. I did a story about a guy who had built a car. He was running at New River Valley Speedway, and we got it all set up for him to take his car to go to Richard Petty's shop. And on that issue, Richard Petty and him were on the cover of that magazine. So
you had success.
I had a lot of success in that space. I realized, though, you didn't make a lot of money in journalism.
Yeah.
But what had happened is I had this one issue of that magazine. This was in '93. And I'm going around then trying to find promotional jobs, and I could lay that magazine down, that issue of Stock Car Magazine, and people would look through it and they'd say, well, you must know what you're talking about here. And one issue of Stock Car Magazine landed me my first professional promoting job.
So what I like about this is, I've kind of done a little bit of everything too. Race car driver, TV, radio. In TV business, they say, send me a tape.
Yeah.
You had articles.
I had articles.
I want to go back to, I know the dirt racers will like it because everybody has their opinion of what they think about Scott Bloomquist. When I think of Bloomquist, I think of weird, extremely talented, different. What was your experience with Scott Bloomquist?
Well, the first time I met him and first time I started watching him, I'm like, this guy is he's different. And
that's what my mom would say. He's different, Ken. He's not weird.
But it was even in the way he drove a race car, because at that time, you were talking 1985, 1988. And Scott really started turning it on around 87, 88, right before he won the World 100. And you'd watch everybody else, they go into the turn, and they're throwing that thing in, ass in first, right into the turns. And Scott's out there, and he's driving straight. And you look at him, and you're like, he's not fast.
I don't like interrupting, but I got to here because I'm a dirt racer.
Yeah.
Do you think that Scott Bloomquist and maybe Billy Moyer, that they were the first ones that brought asphalt style into dirt racing? Because it's always said the money is won when the track's dry.
Yeah, I believe that. And you take a look at who Scott was racing against at that time. It was the best battles of that time were Scott Bloomquist, Billy Moyer, Jack Boggs. I remember watching races where Jack and Scott would go side by side for lap after lap after lap. And it was just the approach they took to driving. And it was funny, you know how the racers are. It's like, this is the hot setup. So Scott was driving those Masterbuilt cars.
Yeah.
Buddy, everybody was dumping everybody else, and they were going to those Masterbuilts. Well, what was happening, and Keith and Tater Masters would tell you, when Scott comes in here to get his race car, he leaves with a whole lot of extra metal.
Yeah.
We don't know what he does with it because he won't even show us. And so then you knew it wasn't just the driver, it was the setup and the approach. And Scott was just so meticulous about everything. And that was like going into his shop. Now, Scott couldn't work on a motor to save his life. He couldn't even touch a carburetor or anything like that. But Scott had figured something out. I think it was from his old man with the airplanes and all that stuff that he was looking at. But he found something different, and he thought about it different. And his approach from setup to his first lap on the racetrack was always just a little bit different. And I think he revolutionized the sport with just that approach.
So we're building this base. You know, how did Chris Blair get to where he's at right now? So you're in Kentucky, you're a dirt racer, you're getting free pit passes because you're writing articles. Now we know you're a dirt racer, okay? And so somewhere in there, college, and, you know, we can go for 2 hours, but we do got to leave time for this racetrack.
Yeah.
You go to college, and somehow you end up getting out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Let's skip over a little bit there.
Yeah.
Get me to the West Coast. How did you get there?
Well, another interesting story. So, having promoted racetracks in Kentucky, I started finding out that there's one consistent thing about working in the dirt racing industry is that somebody's always trying to screw you.
Hell yeah.
And so I was working for some folks.
I got scars on my back.
So I was working at this racetrack, Thunder Ridge, and it was in Prestonsburg, Kentucky. It was a horse track, and they built a stock car track in the middle. Actually, I helped them build the stock car track that ran in the middle. And every Saturday night, and we're talking mid-'90s, we were putting $25,000, $30,000 in the bank for the stock car track.
Making money.
Making money. We were killing it. Because we were the only dirt track in the whole state that actually had a bar. So that helped even more.
Audible.
Yeah.
Do you think you were making money because it was before the cell phone, before this new era?
Yeah, well, back there was really nothing else to do
Right.
in Kentucky. I mean, once high school sports ended, what else do you do in Kentucky? You go to the local track to watch racing, or you go fishing. That's about all you could do. So we were running that track, and we were killing it. We were getting guys from southern Ohio, like Delmas Conley. Charlie Swartz was a regular every week.
Swartz.
We were getting 30, 40 late models. And it was something people don't realize. I'd have people say, well, what do you do during the week? Because you only race on the weekends. What's your job during the week? Well, I was working the phones. I was calling those drivers, getting them there. But kind of getting back to it, we were making $25,000, $30,000 every Saturday night with the stock cars.
That's epic.
The horses ran 5 nights a week, and each time they ran, they lost $5,000. But it was all about that off-track betting and the gaming and all this. And I'm watching this whole cycle go on, and I'm like, well, this isn't sustainable. I could see that. And, it was to the point where everybody's kind of easing in. I could see that most likely at some point what I was earning was getting reduced because I was having to offset the horses and all that. And just one day I get a phone call from Stuart Doty, who ran RPM, the Promoters Workshops.
Oh, that's big.
He said, there's a guy up there you need to go meet, and his name's Rico Hawks. So you need to go meet Rico and talk to him. He said, I think you'd be great with that organization. So I call up Rico. They fly me up to Chicago. They had a limo waiting on me at the airport.
You're big time.
I thought I was big time. Then I found out they do that for everybody that comes in. So I go into Rico's office, and I had no idea who Rico was. I thought he was just this guy who worked in monster trucks and supercross. And I walk in his office, and he had all these pictures on the wall from Ascot. He had Dean Thompson. He had Ron Schumann's picture up on the wall.
Dirt racing.
I walk in, I'm like, hey, that's Dean Thompson. Hey, that's Ron Schumann. He had a picture of Richard Griffin, the gas man, on the wall. And I identified it. Rico's like, you know about Ascot? And I said, yeah. I said, I know about Ascot. He said, I ran Ascot. I said, no, Acajanian ran Ascot. He said, I worked for Acajanian. He said, so my whole job interview with him, he didn't even ask me if I was worth anything at a job. I knew dirt racing.
Yeah.
He said, come on, we're going down the hall. So he takes me down the hall and into the office of Charlie Mancuso. And Charlie is the greatest promoter in all of motorsports entertainment. I mean, he is the man. He's the best.
What made him the best?
Because Charlie could sell anything. Charlie would come up with these ideas. He'd be looking at, what are we going to take to the Seattle Kingdom? He'd say, how about 10 trucks for $10? And he put tickets on sale, 10 trucks for $10, 60,000 people in the kingdom. That's the kind of stuff. And Charlie was just a master of selling products that, a lot of people might not have wanted. Where he was also having to go into stadiums and arenas, and most of the time he could only get those venues in the wintertime.
Is this where the promoting started in your brain?
This is where it really cranked up. And so it was funny. I go in for my interview with Charlie, and Charlie was just this, intimidating character if there ever was.
I call him gnarly.
He was gnarly. He walks in, and I walk in there and I sit down, and like immediately he's like, it's not just, hi, how you doing? Why do you think you should work here?
Oh, boy.
And he's just drilling me, and then he gets down to it and he says, what do you think we sell here? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, what do we sell? How do we pay for this? How do we pay these salaries out here? And I said, you sell tickets. All right, that's good enough for me. And I'm like, what?
Put people in the seats.
Yeah, I'm like, what? He says, most people will come in here, and he said they start some BS about you're selling a fan experience or you're selling these memories. And he said, it all boils down to the ticket. He said, every ticket pays the bills, and that's what we're here to do, sell tickets.
Okay, let's do the audible.
Yeah.
Kenny Conversation's not perfect.
Yeah.
Is it still very big to you to put people in the grandstands?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, for me personally, that's how I judge success. I don't really care about TV ratings like some people do. I mean, it's important. I said it.
No, that's good.
It's important.
That's good stuff. We still got, I wanted to de-bullshit that.
Yeah.
Because, there's this theory now that, we don't need people because,
But what's the first thing most fans complain about?
there's nobody in the grandstands.
There's nobody in the grandstands. But you look at the TV numbers and the consumption numbers across the board, it's probably bigger than it's ever been because we were talking before you got here how everybody's watching on their phones. You're seeing those highlights as they're happening. Hell, everybody's talking about what we saw the other night.
So they're consuming it.
They're consuming it, and they're getting it, and they're probably as engaged as they ever was. It's just not everybody sitting down at the same time, turning on the TV and watching it at the same time. But when you look at overall how everybody's consuming the sport, I think it's in a very, very good spot right now.
Okay,
But for me personally, I want to see butts in the seats because that's how I get judged, and for me, that's my level of satisfaction.
Okay, so sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just had because you just kind of served it up on a platter there.
Yeah.
So let's go back. Okay, so he says to you, what are we selling here? You say tickets.
We're selling tickets.
All right, take it from
I
there.
was the only guy who hadn't bullshitted him, basically. So
You can't bullshit the bullshit artist.
Yeah, exactly. So from there, Charlie, he quickly advanced me. I was in just a short time, I became the director of operations for the motorsports division there. It later became Feld Entertainment. At the time, it was SRO, and then became Pace. It's now Feld, big entertainment group. And then I really enjoyed creating events, and he created a position just for me. I was the director of business development. And so I was able to produce events at Charlotte Motor Speedway, U.S. Truck Fest. We took a show to Charlotte, got to work with Humpy. So for me, that was a big moment. Yeah, Humpy Wheeler. So that was a big moment in my life for that. Got to meet, lifetime friends. Roger Slack was working as an intern at Charlotte at the time. He became a good friend of mine through that. But got to meet so many people, Jerry Gappins and all those folks, Ed Clark, had all those people that helped me with that.
You can tell I want to throw another audible. Okay,
Yeah.
So you meet the great promoters of all time.
Yeah.
Humpy Wheeler, you're talking about, PRI show, the whole deal here.
Yeah.
Myself, Jeff Gordon, Bobby Labonte, when we came in as rookies in, 93, they had us at Barnum Bailey, and they had us on elephants. And I thought, okay, this is getting a little circus.
Yeah.
So is that the way it was back then? Was it a shock factor? Look here, we're going to put Dale Earnhardt on a horse, or
Yeah.
Are you still that person, or is that era gone? The shock factor. I mean, we just lost Eddie Gossage.
Yeah.
And Eddie had a goat with a number 3 on it. The goat,
Yeah.
greatest of all time, and he had a real goat.
Yeah.
I mean, have we changed? Or are we still there?
I think a lot of it is the era that we're in right now.
Yeah.
I almost feel like to some degree there's a restrictor plate on promotion in that we want to go pretty wild on some things. And a good example is like last year when we had this whole thing with the Ross Chastain.
Oh, yeah. The watermelon.
Yeah. Well, and I came up with this one ad. We produced the ad, and I actually shared it with you. You shared it with Dale Jr. Dale Jr. gave us feedback on this ad, and Dale Jr. loved it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of sent it out, get some feedback on it. It's like, oh, we better ease up a little bit. And 'cause about the same time, everybody was trying to get Ross to ease up. And we had to ease up.
Right.
And it was one of those, okay, is this the hill that you die on, to try to be outrageous? And so we made up for it by having Ross smashing watermelons with you out here on the stage. But, there's a lot of that. You got to realize, okay, what is the reward really worth the risk on some of this that you do? Because there's a lot of sensitive factors at play in the industry.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to okay, let's look at this from multiple angles. And I have a lot of people that I take advice from where I'm thinking this is going to be the greatest thing ever. But I always like to try to get a little bit of view from the outside because, you could step on some toes.
Okay, so we're in the same genre. Okay, right now we got to talking about you meeting the great promoters in your career. We're still on path here.
Yeah.
And I say, are we too circus? We had a great conversation where you wanted, last year, this race, Kyle Busch wins it, but you wanted to capitalize on Ross Chastain wrecking everybody.
Yeah.
And you told me, my God, it's great. We're selling tickets, but the industry backs you down. They say, well, back down.
Yeah.
Tell me about that time.
Well, it's more taking the temperature of everybody in the room. And no one really came right out and said, whoa, slam on the brakes. And of the people I get advice from, I've got one over here saying, hell yeah, pour it on. And I've got another one over here saying, let's ease up just a little bit. And then, then I had to take a look at it and say, well, what can we do? Is it really going to sell any more tickets? What can we do here that's going to create something that's going to be a little more memorable?
Yeah.
And so that way, I would rather have it where people leave the racetrack saying, did you see what they did back there?
Yeah.
So that's when, I carry a watermelon out and put it on the stage and give you a hammer.
Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
This is the great promoter that Chris is. And we're still in we're still in his career. And we're going to get to this racetrack in a minute. So you dream up, and now I'm thinking about when Humpy Wheeler, all these things that you've seen. So you bring me a watermelon. Yeah. And I've already done some scathing Kenny Wallace shows about why Ross has to quit wrecking people because his motors are given to him by Rick Hendrick. Yeah. He's wrecking guys that are giving them product. I'm like, hey. So you're like, okay, you give me a watermelon. He gives me a sludge hammer. Yeah. And it don't go good. Here comes Ross on stage. He's super good. Now, this is all your idea. Yeah. This is his idea. I'm like, okay. Bam. And my sludge hammer gets stuck in there. Yeah. And I just get splattered. And I'm getting ready to go live on Fox. Yeah. You give me a new shirt, and Ross is cool with it. And what I learned, Ross Chastain says, it's not easy. That's why you slam them.
Well, he also said, or you can slice them up a little bit to get a soft spot in it so that when you hit it, it'll splatter. Well, hell, we didn't know that. The funny part is Kenny needs a new shirt, so I'm scrambling to get him a shirt, and luckily he threw one on that had our sponsor, Enjoy Illinois 300 logo before he goes on Fox. So that worked out really, really well. Because everybody loved that shirt.
But this is the genius you are.
That was dumb luck, is all that was.
Really?
That was dumb luck.
Well, they say the best plans are the ones you don't plan.
Yeah, but the funniest part about this, I don't know if I ever told you about this, it's like 30, 45 minutes later, I'm going by the stage, and the stage manager is ready to kill me because they're still trying to clean up watermelon. And they're like, and even in one of my pre-event meetings a few weeks ago, the number one question was, is there going to be a damn watermelon on the stage this year? Because I can't even remember the stage manager's name was, but he was still pissed off about that watermelon juice being all over all of his equipment.
I like this journey we're going on. Okay, so we stopped at Charlotte Motor Speedway. You see what Humpy Wheeler's doing. Yeah. They're very theatrical. We got animals involved, circuses. So the watermelon last year, right here, was a little bit of that. All right, so I want to know how you get out to Oregon, how you get out to Vegas.
Out that way. Yeah, so doing all this stuff in Chicago, and we learned some very creative promotional stuff there with Charlie. For me, it was really tough at the time because I was just worn out. I was doing 16 weeks on the road where I would leave Chicago, fly somewhere warm and beautiful, come back, had enough time to do my laundry, work on the next show, boom, I'm back out on the road again. I was getting kind of burnt out on that. And at the time, going into the 1997 season, the one guy that I seemed to work with the most was a guy by the name of Glenn Cromwell. Glenn is now the president of NHRA.
Badass.
So
now we're connecting dots.
Yeah, we're connecting dots. So we're going into this, and I was mainly the operations guy. Glenn was the marketing guy. And we would go in and do shows together. We worked together every weekend. It's like we would team up. And that was, I was Glenn's ops guy. He was my marketing guy. We had a streak of 5 weeks in a row where we sold 50,000 tickets. We sold out the Georgia Dome. We sold out consecutive nights in Landover, Maryland.
And what kind of events are these?
These were a little bit of everything. It was Monster Jam shows. It was thrill shows at the Pontiac Silverdome. It was Supercross events at the Georgia Dome. I mean, we were doing it all. And I had an off weekend. And I leave and I come back in on Monday, or actually it's Tuesday. It was the weekend of the Final Four. I went and watched the Kentucky Wildcats play up in Indianapolis. I come into the office on Monday, and one of my coworkers said, "Did you hear about Glenn?" And I said, "No, what happened?" They said, "He went to work for NHRA." Oh, okay. So I call him. I'm like, "What the hell, man?" I said, "You went to work for NHRA?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I found out you put in an application with them too." I said, "Well, yeah, I did, because there had been an opening there." He says, "They're going to be giving you a call." He said, "I'm taking over Division 7 in California." He said, "There's an opening coming up in Seattle." He said, "I've already put your name in for it."
Here we go. Now here's where we get to the Northeast.
Yeah,
or Northwest.
3 months later, I actually did my first job interview with NHRA. First time I'm ever at an NHRA drag race was right here. It was Gateway International, 1997, the first ever NHRA event they had. It was here. I drove down from Chicago to have my interview. And I interviewed with the guy who hired me, Gene Bergstrom, but I had to do an interview with Dallas Gardner, who was the president of NHRA.
What a name. What a name.
Got to meet Wally Parks, who was the founder of NHRA.
Another name.
And I passed the test. Graham Light, who was the VP of operations and competition, they signed me off. 3 weeks later, I'm in a moving truck driving to Seattle. Never been to Seattle before. And I'm driving in with everything I have in the back of a moving truck, and went to work doing drag racing.
Let's stop right there for a minute. When you come into Worldwide Technology Raceway, one big billboard that you have up there, you and Curtis, that really strikes me really awesome. Worldwide Technology Raceway, from what I understand, is the only racetrack in America that has NASCAR, NHRA,
Yep.
and IndyCar.
Yep, that's correct.
And I believe some of these stories that you're telling me right now have a lot to do with that. So okay, now you're there.
Yep.
And you're in NHRA.
Yeah, NHRA, it was fantastic because I'm a person who never worked in drag racing at all. I mean, it was going into it. You talk about going in blind. I went in blind, but I had a great support group there were some great promoters up there, great track operators in that area. There was a great crew of people. I mean, even the guy that I kind of beat out for that job, he was my starter, and he stood by me, and I made sure that when I left, he was the guy I got him in that position up there. But I got to meet so many people, and that job more than anything taught me the relationships of how important it is for officials, race officials, promoters, everybody to have good relationships.
You know how the business works
with
now.
the participants, yeah. Because the majority of your customers are sportsman racers, guys who have successful businesses. That they're doing this because it's their hobby, it's their golf. You also have some other guys that they're struggling to get from track to track. So you had to learn how to work with all those folks. And me going in there, it's like I had a target on my back because they're sending in this guy who knows nothing about drag racing. Well, I made sure that I got to meet the right people and got the education from the people that I needed.
This makes me laugh because this show, the Kenny Wallace show, is run by Charlie Marlowe. Well, Charlie's ball and stick.
Yeah.
I got to know him through, Cardinals, and I said, "Charlie, you don't know nothing about racing." And he says, "Now I do." Same with you.
It was the same thing.
You didn't know anything about that, but okay, now you're building this resume.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you go to get a job, they say, "Let me see your resume." Well, that means you got to do a lot of different things. So now you're building this resume.
Yeah.
So now you go to Vegas.
Yeah. And it was totally, talk about everything, all the stars and moon aligning all at once. So I get a phone call from my buddy Roger Slack. And Roger calls me up. He said, "There's a job opening that I think you're the only guy on the planet that is capable of doing this job." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" He says, "Well, they built the drag strip at Vegas." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's beautiful." He said, "Well, they built the drag strip there.
Is that 4 wide?
It wasn't at the time, but it is now.
Okay.
But it was just a spectacular facility. And he said, and they've got a dirt track there. And he said, they're having problems with the dirt track. And he said, Chris Powell from
that was bad dirt. That was
terrible dirt.
It was. We're in the middle of the desert, and
yeah.
we're going to run dirt cars.
So Chris Powell, who's still the president out there at Vegas, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, Roger Slack says I need to be talking to you." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "He's warned me." And he says, "Well," he said, I need somebody that knows drag racing and somebody that knows dirt racing." He said, "I got one question for you. Do you know how to operate a blade?" I said, "I do not."
Now you're becoming a farmer.
Yeah, I said, "I do not, but I'll learn if the price is right." And Chris said, "Well, come on down here, let's talk." So I fly down and I talk to Chris, and I really loved Seattle. I mean, I loved the Northwest. I had all of Western Canada. It was like every event that I went to, it was like going on vacation because it was just so beautiful and the people were so nice. So I go down there for the interview, and I'm like, Chris, I don't know. I said, let me think about it. Well, I go home, and as I'm thinking about it, I'm at my office one day, and I start feeling the ground shake.
This is big.
And it was the earthquake.
A real earthquake.
It was
not a tremble.
And I'd even been thinking about this and having conversations with my mom and dad and all the family and stuff. I said, I'm not sure if it's what I need to do. And then that earthquake came along and shook the hell out of me.
Yeah, scared you.
It was about the same time that happened. And then Chris calls me up and he says, "Well, did that earthquake shake any sense into you?" And I said, "Well, it may be worth us having another conversation." So we talked some more, and a few months later, as much as I didn't want to leave the Northwest, as much as I didn't want to leave NHRA because I had so many good relationships, it was the right thing for me to do at the time.
I do find it, and this is speaking to all of you out there, I do find people that are like, we see baseball players. I'm a big baseball guy. Mm-hmm. And they're like, "Where do you want to play? You're great." And they're like, "Well, I don't really like this area." Sometimes regions, sometimes we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So that scared you.
Yeah, it really did.
That area.
Yeah.
Even though it's beautiful.
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer in, kind of like the Blues Brothers. It's a sign from God. That was a sign from God, man. And it was one of those things too. Had I stayed there at that time, had I gotten more attached to that community, I probably never would have left, and I probably wouldn't be in racing now because there just weren't a lot of opportunities for racing if you live in the Northwest.
Yeah. You couldn't grow there.
I couldn't grow there.
Very secluded.
And the one thing about this too is I had a really good conversation with Tom Compton, who's the president of NHRA at the time. I called him up and said, "Tom, I hate to do this, but here's this opportunity that I've got." And Tom said, "Listen," he said, "it's important for us, for Vegas to be a successful racetrack." And he said, "If you can help us get your replacement in here, if you can help us with some of the events that are coming up," he said, "we fully support you because we know you'll probably come back someday."
That's big.
Yeah. And and Tom and I remained friends for many, many years.
Never burn a bridge.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
Never burn a bridge.
So, I get down there to Vegas, and, it was the busiest drag strip. I made it the busiest drag strip in the country at the time. And that's one thing, Vegas being Vegas, we created some fantastic events, and it eventually got 2 NHRA national events. We were doing all kinds of testing, all kinds of other events taking place there. That's how I started getting a lot of good relationships with the professional drivers. As far as that dirt track that the dirt was so bad on, I was bringing in Randy Grove from Hagerstown, Maryland to help us get the dirt ready. I had Bob, a sergeant, come in and help me out a couple of times because you were in the middle of the desert and the wind was always blowing. It was a challenge. But we had an event out there called the Duel in the Desert.
Oh, yeah.
And when
very successful.
That first year, we had 40 cars in that race. My last year there, we were at 270. And 270 modifieds in one race. So that was one that took a lot of pride in. And as time progressed there, it went from just being the drag strip and the dirt track to also the bull ring, which is the asphalt track there. So
were the Bush brothers, Kurt and Kyle, they grew up at the bull ring. That really is a little metropolis. Yeah. Cup track, drag strip, dirt track, bull ring.
Yeah.
Road course.
Road courses, multiple road courses,
5.
Go-kart tracks, off-road track.
6, 7.
Yeah, so that's
7 opportunities.
Oh, and they've added more even since then. So there was just a lot that we could do and could take advantage of, and stayed busy.
Let me throw an audible here. What do you remember them doing? Because, I mean, they're still running the dirt track. How did they get that dirt? How did you all get that dirt to hold together? Do you remember anything? I mean, I'm not saying you were doing it.
Well, what we ended up doing, because it was sand and dust, there was up the road a little ways in Apex, Nevada, there was a gypsum plant.
Gypsum, yeah.
And they the waste containment ponds from the gypsum, it was almost like a clay that you use. And David Stetzer, who's still out there at Vegas now, somehow he stumbled upon finding this clay, and they were looking to get rid of it. They were cleaning out those ponds. We started bringing that down and put that on the racing surface, and it revolutionized it. It went from being just a terrible surface to making it a good surface. The only problem is that gypsum would only last every few years. You'd have to start all over again with it. But and to pull off a race successfully there, we were having to start prep 3-4 weeks out for that one weekend of racing. And to make it work, you almost needed it to black slick over to hold together.
So I'm thinking to myself, you know, you're creating this journey, and every step so far, it seems to me like you're doing better.
Yeah.
Every level you're going, you're making more money, right? Because so what life is about, the journey. You want to do better. You want to support yourself. So you're doing that.
Yeah.
You end up somehow getting now you're going back to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, no, actually, I'm still staying in Vegas. I'm working there at Vegas, doing all their stuff, but I'm making the connections with a lot of folks.
Okay.
You know, an opportunity in Charlotte did come about when Bruton was building the drag strip there. I actually went back and talked to him, and that was at the same time Humpy was still there. So I had conversations with Humpy about it. I had conversations with Bruton about it. I went back and met with Marcus one time about the drag strip there. But at the time, with everything that was going on in the housing market in Vegas, I was way upside down on a house. Just trying to unload real estate to move to another part of the country was going to be tough. And so that's one reason we stuck around there for a while longer.
So for the second time, I want to leave a little bit of room for this racetrack and talk about this. You end up somehow getting here.
So that is,
let's skip some things.
Yeah.
But give me some highlights.
Yeah.
Get me to where you're at now.
Well, how I got here is we were having an NHRA track.
It's like the life and times of.
Yeah.
This is going to take days, so somehow we got to skip some things.
So I ended up. NHRA was having a track operator meeting in Newport Beach, California.
Oh, great names.
I go to
Newport Beach.
Yeah, so I'm at this track operator meeting, and I end up at a table with a guy named Curtis Francois, some sports car racing guy from St. Louis, and I'm like, well, so what's he doing? Well, he's going to be the guy who's taking over the track at Gateway. And I end up at the table with Curtis, and we just start shooting the breeze, and he's asking me a few questions, and I'm telling him about, how my first drag race was there and all that. And we just hit it off in some conversations. And it was funny, a guy who had worked for me at Vegas and had moved around some had applied for a job here as being the drag strip manager. And they called me, Curtis had one of the guys that worked for him call me, and they were asking me about the individual that had worked for me. And then Curtis chimes in, he says, well, what are you doing?
To you?
To me. And he said, would you want to come back here and talk to us about running this racetrack? And I'm like, sure. He said, okay, I'll send you a ticket. Can you come back tomorrow?
Wow.
I said, can I have an extra day or two? And so we come back and we sit down. And Curtis drives me around and shows me everything that he has planned and the visions and all that. And at the time I said, if this guy can pull off 50% of what he says he's going to do, it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And for me personally, there was a couple of things that were going on at the time. My parents still lived in Kentucky, and they were getting older.
Now you can get closer to mom and dad.
Yeah, my dad was having health issues. My wife at the time, her family was from northern Illinois. Her dad had some health issues, and we found out that her mom was having a cancer battle. So there was just a lot of things that aligned. So she was 5 hours away from, or 4.5 hours away from her parents at a time they needed her. I'm 6 hours away from my parents at a time they needed me. And that's why the move was made to come here.
I look at your life as like a racetrack. You start in Kentucky, Indy, IRP somewhat, I'm just thinking like that. And then you go out there, now you're at turn 3 up there in Oregon. You come down to turn 4 into Vegas.
Yep.
And now you're coming, your life has been a really good evolution. You know, now you're back here. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're here.
Yeah.
We've laid your career out. We've give you all some hope. It's part of the journey. Look at his journey. Starts in Kentucky. No Scott Bloomquist. Now you've created all these ties.
Yeah.
You're a dirt racer. You're a drag racer. And now that you're a promoter, you can relate with John Force. You can relate with Scott Bloomquist or some of the new kids, you know.
Yeah.
Now you're here. And here we are to this day.
Yeah.
NASCAR week, the Cup race, June 2nd. We got the truck race on that Saturday. This track is beautiful now. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Tell me about race weekend here. What can we expect here at the racetrack?
What we're always trying to do, I just gave a speech yesterday to a lot of our new employees and our interns about we're only as good as our next race.
Yeah.
So, and people have come to accept that here. You take a look at what we pulled off that first year. There was a big wow factor. You know, last year, along with you smashing watermelons, we had big concerts. We had all the other stuff, lots of improvements.
I got to stop you right here. Remind me the name, my ADD, Confluence Music.
The Confluence Music Festival.
This music festival here, and I asked you, I said, how do you get such big names? Remind everybody, remind us, this is an event, you know, racing, the Cup Series, the Truck Series, music, some of the past and who we got coming.
Well, the way it all started out, we wanted, you know, it's just about every NASCAR race anymore, you have some national artist who's performing. And as we were working on this, and you know, Curtis and he's like, Curtis makes a list. Let's see if we can go find these guys. And in a conversation he was having with David Stewart, who was the founder of Worldwide Technology, our sponsor, Curtis saying, you know, we're wanting to try some, you know, find some good music acts. And David he's very involved with the arts scene here in St. Louis with sponsorship of the Muni. He sponsors the Blues.
Good man. He's involved in everything, is right.
Very, very proud of the St. Louis area. And he says, well, I want to be involved with this music piece. And we're like, oh, okay, so he's going to help sponsor it. Well, the next thing I know, we have a meeting, and he's got like 5 staff members from Worldwide. He's got the Kofi Coleman, who runs the Muni. He's got him on there. He brings in Michael Van Hee, who promotes concerts here in the area. He's got them on the board. And next thing I know, they're shooting for the moon. They're like, well, who would you want? And I'm like, well, it depends who has to pay for this. How are we going to make this work? And, you know, that first year, we had Old Dominion here playing, and as for our post-race concert. And, you know, they started out, they had 30 bands, 5 stages.
30 bands, 5 stages, down here in turns 1 and 2.
Yeah, and, you know, I said, hey, we want to have a very memorable national anthem. And Dave says, well, if we're doing the national anthem, we got to bring in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, my God.
And so we're like, okay, there's 60 people for this orchestra, you know, so he brings that in. So then the next year, he's like, well, we got to go bigger. So, you know, last year it's Dierks Bentley, and, you know, it was one thing after
these
another.
These aren't regional acts, race fans. These are worldwide people.
And, you know, again, 30 bands, 5 stages. It's a production all in itself. Now this year, here we are again, and, you know, we got Ludacris, we've got T-Pain, we've got Big and Rich, we've got Riley Green, and it's because of the great support of Dave Stewart, the Stewart Family Foundation, those folks. We're basically taking a great NASCAR race weekend and all the things that's so great about NASCAR, and we're bringing all these music festival elements and putting them all together for just to show that way it offers something for everybody. And that way, if you get that one person in your group who, well, we like going to concerts, don't really care about racing. Right. You get somebody who likes racing and doesn't care about concerts. That brings them all together with one ticket that gets them everything they need to see. For
I want to talk about that for a moment because I find it fascinating. To me, it's always the McDonald thing. Yeah. You know, when McDonald's started, you go through the drive-through, and it took about this. Nowadays, if you have to wait 30 seconds for anything, people are losing their mind. Yeah. The people at Facebook told me that there was this 49-second thing. Years ago in social media, 49 seconds, people start blinking. Yeah. So that's the analogy I use. But now it's this whole new world where we got to have more. We go to We go to the Blues game, and there's the hockey. There's a band down here. Speak to that.
Yeah.
About just we got to have more.
I think no matter what you do anymore in racing, it's or any form of entertainment, even
anything, baseball, football, it don't matter.
Even going to the movie theater, it's about the experience. It's less about the event itself.
Yeah,
it's
now we're having dinner and beer at movies.
Yeah, it's about the atmosphere. It's about the experience. It's about the comfort level. Those are the factors that seem to weigh in anymore. I mean, you take a look at it, which racetracks, which dirt tracks are successful, which short tracks are successful these days. It's the ones who give you something that you leave talking about.
Fairbury, Illinois, for all you dirt racers, Fairbury is making more money on their concerts right now. I mean, all the races are big, but they're using it as music venue. Oh, we're going to have a race, so I like it.
But you think about when you go, though, to the Prairie Dirt Classic up there at Fairbury, or when you go to Oktoberfest at La Crosse, Wisconsin.
He knows all the names.
Those are the events I go to because, you never know what you might pick up and what you might see. I'll use Prairie Dirt Classic, for example. I remember a few years ago, I go up there and they've got the guitar player from Guns N' Roses or some
Slash?
band. No, it wasn't Slash. It was like some local guy who'd been filling in for them with Axl. But they had this guy doing the national anthem, and he's on a scissor lift out in the middle of the infield. And as he's playing, they're raising him up. I said, that's pretty damn cool.
For dirt racing.
At a dirt race. But you look at the overall atmosphere of everything else they do with the camping experience. It's just going to a race anymore, to walk through the gates, sit down, watch cars go around in circles, and then leave. I don't think that cuts it anymore. And I think that's why everywhere you go, everybody's got to be stepping up their game to make it where it's memorable from the time you get out of your car in the parking lot until the time you leave and you're driving out the gate. So you've got to have infield fan experiences. You got to have a gateway garage where fans can get up close to the teams. You think about it. And I shared video with you a few weeks ago from Talladega.
Yeah.
At Talladega, you got Big Bill's in the infield. And that place was packed. And
while the race is going on.
Race is going on. You've got people sitting in lounge chairs looking at a video screen while the race is behind them. You've got people inside Big Bill's watching everything on a video screen, but they're all gathered around together. And you notice the way they're watching the race, they're sitting at a table looking at the race almost like this while they're still talking with one another. Where if they're sitting in the grandstands looking straight ahead, they're not getting that interaction with everybody.
Respond right here. I'm going to ask him this question. This has been burning a hole in my brain for 3 years. Respond right here. I'm going to ask him. Okay. I go to the St. Louis Blues hockey game.
Yep.
I have to go to the bathroom. I get up and I'm going to the bathroom. Half the crowd is in a bar area. We got what we call a Jack Daniels area.
Yeah.
It's packed. They're drinking, watching the TV while they're at the event.
At the event.
What is that phenomenon?
I'm still trying to figure out myself, but I think a lot of it is people are looking for ways to socialize and get out and do things together.
Because when you're sitting here, you can't.
Because if you're side by side, you're having to lean around to talk to the next guy, and the person behind you, who you might not know, is hearing your conversation. I think a lot of people just want to do things in a group setting, and this is a way for them to interact. Even when you go to a Cardinals game now, like if the Cardinals outside of it's right field, that upper Budweiser deck. You'll go up there and baseball games.
Budweiser Terrace.
Yeah, Budweiser Terrace, and you got people up there playing cornhole
while the game's going
on. But
respond right here. Why? Why do you all do that? I want to learn. You go to the game, you go to the race, you hear it, but you're over here.
But the thing I look at when you see that, especially at races, we'll use Talladega as an example. The family, mom and dad, they're sitting at a picnic table watching the race. 30 feet away is a playground, and the kids are bouncing around.
It gets worse.
Yeah, well, so the kids are playing, and they're having a good time. Now, if mom and dad and the kids are sitting up in the grandstands, and you're having to keep little Junior entertained for a full race, it could be challenging. So I think that's contributing to a lot of this, too. This way the whole family can go do something. The kids can stay entertained. The parents can still get their time together. And it's just part of that overall feel.
We're still here at this racetrack in this conversation. So, I go to the Cardinal game. We go to these racetracks now, and you all are spending millions of dollars on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Because we don't assume the fans come to the grandstands, but they want to get on their phones.
Exactly.
What is that phenomenon?
everybody has to have that up to the minute info. You know, you got to grab that phone and look at it. Now here's the thing I look at is if I'm watching a race, every year I go to Phoenix and I sit in the grandstands with my girlfriend, her kid, and her family. We sit there in the stands. We've got the headphones on, listening to MRN. But I always keep my phone going because I want to see what Bob Pockers has to say.
And the crew chiefs or the
what,
PR people.
What the PR people want to say. I want to see what does Jeff Gluck think about what just happened? What does Bob Pockers think about what happened? You know, so I'm scrolling through there trying to stay on top of that. Plus, by going to my phone, I'm getting all the live timing. I've got all that. You know, it's at your fingertips.
This makes the phone. Okay, the phone makes the most sense to me because, as you said, you're at Phoenix, and. You know, Joey Logano has issues, and you don't know why he's got issues, but you can grab your phone, and Joey Logano's PR people are immediately, that one I buy.
Well, or a lot of things too. If your favorite driver is running middle of the pack, and you're wondering why is he just not getting it today, and he's not up there far enough that MRN's really giving you those details, and you want to know right now, you know, why is Christopher's car smoking, or why is Alex's car doing this? You can go in and you can start looking for what those, you know, you're getting those other updates. And one of the things I see too now is even when you go to the dirt races, I think one of the greatest things that ever happened in dirt racing was my laps, because I was going to all these racetracks where I only knew one or two guys in the field.
Oh yeah.
The announcer might not have all the best info, or it's loud and you can't hear the play-by-play. It's not broadcast where you can listen to it on a scanner, but I can pull out my phone and I can watch my laps and the timing and see the real running order, especially when they get into lap traffic. I mean, I think that helped revolutionize the live event experience on the short track level too. So it's all technology based.
Chris, there's so much to say, but let's wrap it up. All right, June 1st and 2nd.
Yeah.
Do we have anything going on Friday here?
Yeah. So on Friday, we're going to have truck practice and qualifying. That'll be taking place. We open up the racetrack for the fans to come in and do a track walk. So we want the fans to come in and check everything out. On Friday at Ballpark Village, we're going to be doing our Fan Fest. And this year, the Holler Parade, which 2 years ago we had a Holler Parade on Thursday night. This year, to make it more convenient for the teams, we're going to do a noon Holler Parade. So fans can go to Ballpark Village and see all the Cup haulers rolling past.
So you mean the NASCAR truck and trailers are going to station themselves in the city of St. Louis?
Well, actually, they're going to start here where they're going to get a police escort around town by Ballpark Village. So they'll be going between Ballpark Village and Cardinal Stadium.
That's awesome.
And, you know, we did that.
Did you pull that off?
That was a big team effort. That involved working with NASCAR. Most importantly, it's working with the Cup hauler drivers, because you got to make sure they're happy and want to do this. And they had such a great experience 2 years ago that they want to come back and do that one again. But you know, we're going to bring them through there. And another thing that's new this year that we're trying, it's completely different, working with Gordy and Gundaker and Kevin and Tammy. And we're working
Tri-City Speedway, Granite City, Illinois.
And we're also working with Rigsby and the folks from Dirt on Dirt, where we're going to do a kickoff party over here at the pavilion area outside the track on Thursday night. So some of the dirt cars are going to come over here and be on display.
Awesome.
Rigsby's going to be over here interviewing some of those guys. We're inviting all the dirt fans. So that's happening the same time we're having our camper kickoff party, and the same time that we're finishing up the JJK 5K run. They're all going to be coming together in that one spot. So there's going to be a big crowd of folks right there in that area. So it's going to be a really, really special Thursday night kickoff. So all the campers, dirt fans, 5K runners, everybody in one spot, just kind of officially kick off race week.
And that, my friends, is the genius of Chris Blair. What a great promoter. Started in dirt.
Genius. Wow.
You're married. We're going to end it like this. So you're quickly becoming, you are one of the greatest promoters of our era. Here you are, full-blown man now. You heard his journey, but you're marrying all the dirt racers. We got Tri-City Speedway, Granite City, Illinois. They're racing Friday night. I'll be there with my modified Friday night. Gordy Gundaker, yourself, $20,000 to win Saturday night. Sunday, the big cup race. Of course, the truck race is here Saturday night. You go over there, and you've got all your dirt friends. We're one big happy family.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing I want to point out. I can't let us get away without bringing this up. that's one of the things we've all felt that's very, very important for a long time. You and I have had those conversations at the restaurants.
Kind of
many
one of my
times.
ideals there, I have to say.
Yep.
I said we got to get our dirt friends over here because at the time they hated NASCAR.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like NASCAR. Well, we're going to make you like it.
Well, here's the great thing about this, and with me currently, I promote NASCAR, I promote NHRA, I promote IndyCar. Right now, I've got Kyle Larson, who's bringing together our NASCAR friends. He's bringing together IndyCar fans. He's bringing our dirt track fans all together. So now, for the first time, we've got people who, the guy who sits in the stands out here at Tri-City Speedway, who could care less about IndyCars, is now watching IndyCar because he wants to see what Kyle Larson's going to do. Kyle's bringing that community together.
How big is Kyle Larson?
It's size-wise or overall scope. It's huge. I had somebody ask me about that the other day. They said, what are your thoughts are? What do you think the IndyCar community thinks about Kyle Larson coming in? I said, every one of those drivers is glad that he's there, even though a lot of people saying he's making it look easy. Now, everybody recognizes he's a talent, okay? Every driver wants him there. Every promoter wants him at their racetrack. The fans, they're always looking for that guy. And now you take a look at what's going on also with Tony Stewart. Tony is now over here in Top Fuel
Now
drag
he's helping
racing.
you with your drag strip.
Yeah,
You're in the catbird seat.
I tell you, so now we've got Tony Stewart. So now, first time ever, NASCAR fans have a reason to be following NHRA drag racing. At the same time, the dirt track fans, because it wasn't that long ago, Tony was over here racing at the local dirt tracks. Now Tony's over here on the drag racing side of things. He's also got those old IndyCar fans from when he drove IndyCar. So guys like Tony Stewart and Kyle Larson could be the greatest thing that could happen in this era of sports because they're basically bridging all the gaps. It's hard for people, for those guys who are always complaining to you about, well, we don't watch NASCAR, but then they tell you everything that happened in the race.
Right.
So we've got arguably two of the best ambassadors we could ever have in racing today in Tony Stewart and Kyle Larson that are bridging those gaps and bringing the whole motorsports community together as one. And at the same time, you're looking at it, you've got now promoters that are promoting multiple disciplines of these races. You've got the sanctioning bodies working together. I know for a fact that Jay Fry from IndyCar, is working closely with the folks over at NASCAR, not just on this Kyle Larson thing, but everything that they're doing. So this is it's a new era in racing because everybody's talking together, everybody's working together because we all have one ultimate goal, and that's for racing to be bigger and better. And for me, being involved with all three of those right now, it's really important. It's at the right time for what we want to try to do.
You see the smile on this face? That's because I love racing. All right, everybody. Remember, we are in podcast form. You can listen to the great Chris Blair on your way to work.
The great. Wow. You're the first person to tell me that.
Every once in a while, you're a man now.
Oh.
You've had this journey.
Oh. Wow.
Listen to him in podcast form, iTunes, Spotify. It's a long one. Listen to him on the way to work, on the way back home. Until then, Charlie Muller and myself, we got the best coming. See you later, everyone.
Thank you.